One is to first flatten the mirror so that it is undistorted, and now a much bigger task of wanting to flip it around without any distortion. So that is… we have not approached that in your life yet. Most of the time you're not even conscious whether it exists or not. If I suck out the air, you cannot live for a moment, isn't it? If we suck out the Akasha, you cannot live for a moment. There is an inscription in Hale Kannada, that means the old type of Kannada, which is over 3,000 years old. There's an inscription talking about how to design an airplane in a temple. And they're saying, you can do like this, but if you fly these machines, it will disturb the ether in the planet. If it disturbs the Akasha, when they say Akasha, don't think space. When they're saying if you disturb the Akasha, then human beings will not know peace in their life.
Before we get into the details of space, Akash, ether, let's watch Sadhguru's video.
Namaskaram, Sadhguru. Sadhguru, one of the 5 elements, Panchabhuta, is Akasha, space, and in one of your YouTube videos, I've heard you, you say ether, you mention ether about space in Akasha. So once you… in your talk now, in time travel you talk about space, so this ether and space, Akasha, I'm a bit confused. Can you please elaborate on the ether part?
I'm glad you're confused because confusion is a much better state to be than stupid conclusions that one makes. Confusion means you're still looking, that's nice. That's my intent, to keep you confused yeah, because I want you to be seeking always. Nobody said Akasha is space, we said Akash is ether. That's not an appropriate translation, but reasonably. Ether is not space, ether is a certain dimension of existence, subtle. When we say space, we are talking about kala or non-existence. We are talking about Shiva, that which is not. When we say Akash, we are talking about that which is. Here you are. Here you are as a human being. There are many levels from grossness to subtleness here. If you have constipation, you still have something gross inside you. Above that, there is a little more refined aspects of body. Above that, there is a lung full of air. Above that, there's a brain and thought and emotion and so many things. And there is life going in and out. And there is Akasha involved. There is water, there is physical material, there is air, there is temperature, there's fire, and there is Akash which makes this. Don't try to understand that, just get this right, because this is made… this is a minicosmos. So if you perceive this right, you know that because today there is no question about this anymore. We've always been saying this in the yogic dimension, but today modern physics has come up with what is called as the constructional theory, which is talking about how the design factor in the universe, whether it's atomic or cosmic, is fundamentally same design. You as a human being with this kind of form, a grasshopper, an earthworm, a bird, a crawly creature somewhere, all of you have same fundamental design. From atomic to cosmic, the fundamental design is same. The complexity and sophistication of how this design evolves into multiple forms is different. Your design is far more complicated and sophisticated compared to that of an amoeba, but the fundamental design is still same. Only the complexity is increasing. So you don't go about trying to observe the cosmos because you don't have a gallery view of the cosmos. You cannot. There's no place where you can sit and observe cosmos. And in fact, you cannot observe anything except what happens within you. Even if you take a telescope and look at the star is happening only the way it projects in your mind, isn't it? Yes? You don't see any star. This is the reason why you see stars which don't actually exist. Many stars that you see don't exist, but they're projected in your mind in a certain way and that's how you know it. Or in other words, you only can experience this, or this is the only doorway through which you can experience anything. Whether you want to experience the food that you eat, or the air that you breathe, or the people around you, or the world around you, or the cosmos, you can only experience it the way this is. If this is very clear, you will see it the way it is. If it has taken many forms and shapes, you will see it in so many different ways. These days, I think largely the mirrors have gotten flat, you know. Even now, I think if you buy some cheap mirror, you will look like this. So, the mirrors give different impressions of who you are. Suppose you always looked at your face with a slightly distorted mirror. After some time, you will assume that's how you look. Yes or no? Yes or no? You think that's how you look, because every day you looked at yourself and that's how you looked, and you think that's how you look. So even now, you think the world looks this way simply because that's how it's projected in your mind. If you evolve this mind to a more refined surface, that there's absolutely no any kind of wavering in it, it is perfectly plain mirror, then it will reflect everything the way it is, but upside down. You know, in the mirror, everything is like this. So now you must have the intelligence to correct this without distorting it. See, most people can't turn a dosa around properly. If they try to turn the dosa around, it'll become those kind of things. It takes certain skill to take something like this and turn it around without distorting it. So this is the problem with the mind. One thing is, already it is wavy or choppy, whichever way you kept your mind, but it is definitely wavy. You're seeing the world in the wavy mirror and it's looking certain way. And most people have never attempted to turn it around because they think that's how it is. When you want to turn it around, it takes a certain amount of skill to be able to turn it around without distorting it. So you have two problems. One is to first flatten the mirror so that it is undistorted, and now a much bigger task of wanting to flip it around without any distortion. So that is… we have not approached that in your life yet. First to make the mirror absolutely without distortions. We still working on that one. Is this air very much a part of you as a life?
Yes.
Those who do not say anything, we're going to throttle you. Your life is spread all over here, isn't it? This is physical. Even in this physical, there are many levels of crudeness and subtlety, isn't it? There are very gross elements in the body, there are subtler elements in this body, there is thought, there is emotion, there is air that you breathe. Or in other words, life is always from a hardcore crudeness to many subtleties. Depends how much you spread, that is how much subtlety you have in your life. How wide your wings spread, that much of subtlety is possible. So now what we're referring to as Akasha is a subtle dimension of life. If you suck out the Akasha, you cannot exist here. If we suck out the air from this hall, you cannot exist here. Though you cannot see it, still it is more vital than your hair, I'm sorry. Because there is more money spent on hair care on the planet, definitely a lot more than the brain care. You see where our values are. If you pull out all your hair, you can still live. If I cut your ears, you can still live. If I cut your nose, you can still live. If I just suck out this air that you cannot even see, most of the time you're not even conscious whether it exists or not. If I suck out the air, you cannot live for a moment, isn't it? If we suck out the Akasha, you cannot live for a moment. There is a there's a temple in Karnataka, in southern India, which is called the Annapurneshwari temple. Anybody from Karnataka? You been to Annapurneshwari? So, at the rear part of the temple where most people may not go, because I am always poking into nooks and corners, others are all happy looking at the goddess. There is an inscription in Hale Kannada, that means the old type of Kannada, which is over 3,000 years old. There's an inscription talking about how to design an airplane in a temple. And they're saying, you can do like this, but if you fly these machines, it will disturb the ether in the planet. If it disturbs the Akasha, when they say Akasha, don't think space. When they're saying if you disturb the Akasha, then human beings will not know peace in their life. Once Akasha is disturbed, then psychological disturbances will become enormous. I think you're a living proof. If we suck out the Akasha, this physical body will not exist for a moment. So when we say Akasha, we are still talking about 5 elements. As you yourself in the question you mentioned, among the 5 elements, Akash is one. So when we say elements, we are not talking about empty space. We are talking about one more substance. Like earth, like water, like air, like fire, we are talking about one more aspect of 5 elements. So do not mistake Akash for empty space.
Space, commonly known as outer space, is a vast region that extends beyond Earth and its atmosphere, encompassing the space between celestial bodies. Outer space is not entirely devoid of matter. It is nearly perfect vacuum, characterized by a sparse presence of particles. These particles primarily include a plasma of hydrogen and helium, electromagnetic radiation, magnetic fields, neutrons, dust and cosmic rays. The standard temperature of outer space, defined by the background radiation originating from the Big Bang, is 2.7 kelvins, equivalent to -270 degrees Celsius. The plasma that resides between galaxies is believed to account for approximately half of baryonic matter in the universe. It has an extremely low number density with fewer than 1 hydrogen atom per cubic meter and a kinetic temperature reaching millions of kelvins. Although stars and galaxies have formed through the concentration of matter, intergalactic space makes up the majority of universe's volume. Even galaxies and star systems are primarily composed of empty space. A significant portion of the remaining mass and energy in the observable universe is attributed to enigmatic entities known as dark matter and dark energy. According to ancient and medieval scientific beliefs, ether, also known as the 5th element or quintessence, is the substance that occupies space beyond the Earth's sphere in the universe. The concept of ether was employed to various theories to account for natural phenomena, including the transmission of light and gravitational forces. In the late 19th century, physicists theorized that ether filled space, acting as a medium for the propagation of light in a vacuum. However, experiments such as the Michelson–Morley experiment failed to provide evidence for the existence of this medium, leading to the conclusion that there is no luminiferous ether. In Plato's Timaeus, he discussed a highly transparent type of substance referred to as ether, primarily associated with air. However, Plato generally adhered to the classical systems of 4 elements. Aristotle, who had been a student of Plato at the academy, shared his view with his mentor. Additionally, Aristotle pointed out that fire had at times been confused with ether. Yet in his work On the Heavens, Aristotle introduced a novel, primary, element in the context of the classical elements from Ionian philosophy. He observed that the four earthly classical elements were subject to change and moved in straight lines, whereas the new primary element existing in the celestial regions and heavenly bodies moved in a circular manner and lacked the qualities of the terrestrial classical elements. It was neither hot nor cold, wet nor dry. This addition expanded the elemental system to fire, and later scholars referred to this new element as the fifth element, also known as ether, a term Aristotle had employed in On the Heavens and Meteorology. Ether was fundamentally distinct from the four earthly elements in that it lacked both qualitative and quantitative motion. It could only exhibit local motion and naturally moved in circular patterns without any opposing or unnatural motions. Aristotle also proposed that celestial spheres made of ether were responsible for holding the stars and planets. This idea of ethereal spheres moving in natural circular motion formed Aristotle's explanation for the observed orbits of stars and planets, which he believed to be perfectly circular. During the medieval era, scholastic philosophers believed that ether could vary in density, with planetary bodies considered denser than the medium that filled the rest of the universe. Robert Flood even described ether as being subtler than light and referred to the 3rd century perspective of Plotinus, which regarded ether as a penetrative and non-material substance. The term quintessence is the Latin name used by medieval alchemists to refer to the fifth element, which was believed to be similar or identical to the substance composing heavenly bodies. It was noted that quintessence had very little presence within the terrestrial sphere, were thought to influence even on earth. This concept was developed in the 14th century text, the Testament of Lalois, attributed to Roman Lull. The use of quintessence gained popularity in medieval alchemy and was derived from the medieval elemental system that included the four classical elements, ether or quintessence, as well as two chemical elements representing metals, sulfur referred to as the stone which burns, signifying the principle of combustibility, and mercury, which embodied the idealized principle of metallic properties. This elemental system rapidly gained popularity throughout Europe and found favor among alchemists, particularly those practicing medicinal alchemy. Medicinal alchemy aimed to isolate quintessence and incorporate it into medicines and elixirs. Due to its perceived pure and celestial nature, quintessence was believed to have the power to purify the body and cure illnesses when consumed. In the Book of Quintessence, a 15th century English translation of continental text, quintessence was employed as a remedy for various human ailments. One method described for creating quintessence involved the sevenfold distillation of alcohol. Over time, the term quintessence became synonymous with elixirs, medicinal alchemy, and even philosopher's stone itself. In 1682, Jacob Bernoulli put forward a theory suggesting that the hardness of substance was linked to the pressure of ether. Ether was employed in various gravitational theories as a medium to help explain the phenomenon of gravity and its underlying causes. A few years later, Sir Isaac Newton incorporated ether into one of his early theories of gravitation. Presented in Philosophy, he based his entire description of planetary motion on a theoretical law of dynamic interactions, departing from previous attempts to explain the interaction between distant bodies. He introduced the concept of an intervening medium, which he referred to as ether. In his ether model, Newton described ether as a continuously flowing substance that moves downward towards the Earth's surface, being partially absorbed and partially diffused. The circulation of ether was associated with the force of gravity, offering an explanation for gravity's effects in a non-mechanical manner. Newton's theory included the idea of varying ether densities, resulting in an ether density gradient. According to his model, ether was denser within objects and rarer outside them. Particles of denser ether interacted with the rarer ether, leading to attraction, similar to how cooling vapors of water are drawn to form liquid. Newton also used this concept to explain the changing rarity and density of ether in a letter to Robert Boyle in 1679. In this letter, he illustrated ether and its field around objects, which served as a way to convey his theory to Robert Boyle, while Newton eventually revised his theory of gravitation to involve forces and laws of motion. This initial ether-based model laid the foundation for the modern understanding and explanation of gravity. The term Akasha or Akash holds various meanings in traditional Indian cosmology, depending on the specific religious or philosophical context. This concept has also been incorporated into Western occultism and spirituality in the late 19th century. In many modern Indo-Aryan and Dravidian languages, the word Akash retains to generic meaning of sky. In Vedantic Hinduism, Akasha refers to the fundamental element and essential element from which all things in the material world originate. It is considered the first element created and is part of the Panchabhuta, or the five gross elements. Akasha is primarily associated with the characteristics of Shabda, meaning sound. In this context, Akasha is often translated as upper sky or space in Hinduism. According to the Nyaya Vaisheshika schools of Hindu philosophy, Akasha or ether is regarded as a fifth physical substance and serves as a foundation for the quality of sound. It is considered eternal and all-pervading, yet imperceptible. In the Samkhya school, Akasha is recognized as one of the five Mahabhutas, which are the grand physical elements, and is specifically associated with the property of sound. The Shiva Purana attributes to Akasha the sole attribute of sound. In the Linga Purana, Akash is translated as firmament, as listed as one of the 1008 names of Lord Shiva. In Western mystic religious philosophy, particularly in theosophy, the term Akasha has gained popularity as an adjective through the use of phrases like Akashic records or Akashic library. These phrases refer to an ethereal repository of all knowledge and history.